Hello, my name is Mike Gag, and in this video we are going to look at the text box control in our series on Windows programming with C#. We just got done talking about buttons, and buttons are pretty neat because you can do all sorts of interactive stuff with them. And before that we talked about labels. Again, really neat. You can put text on the screen and stuff like that. However, the big issue we have currently is we have no real interaction with the user. No way for the user to tell us things. Before, when we had console applications, we could do a console.readline and read stuff in from the user, but neither the button or the label really gives us the ability to do that. In comes the text box. The text box is a great control because it allows us to write things to the user and read things from the user. All right, the text box is basically a control that contains text, and the text, unlike the label, is editable at runtime by the user. So we can, read things in from the text property and put things into the text property and stuff, and have a viable conversation, if you will. Now, the first thing I want to mention is some of the more useful properties of the text box. So I'm going to head to my toolbox here, and I'm going to find the text box, and I will double click it and place it there. And real quick, I'll just run it, and we see I have a text box, and I can type all stuff in there and remove it and do whatever. Okay, so that's all well and good. I will highlight my text box. And a couple things here, the name, again, very useful. I'm just going to leave this text box one. I don't really have anything particular I want to name it. And another thing we want here is where are you? The text property. So I can say something like enter a name here, give the user some instructions. Ooh, if I can type anyway. And then when I run it, we see enter name here, and the user can go, oh, okay, Mike, and do something with that. All right. A couple other really neat things we can do with this highlighted. I'm going to come up here to the cursor property. We see this I-beam. When I run it, you'll notice when I mouse over it, I get that I-beam. That's what that's called. I can change that if I want to be any sort of stuff. If I want to mislead my user, I could pick the no, and then when they mouse over, they're like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. We can change the cursor, but it defaults the I-beam there because that's what users expect when they want to type stuff in there. Another neat property of the text box is the ability to turn it into a password box. Now, you're all probably pretty familiar with that when you go to like a web page or anything that asks for a username and password. When you type your username, it's in plain text so you can see it. But when you type in your password, all you see are dots or asterisks because it's hidden, so people sitting around you can't see what your password is. We can do the same thing. Let's pretend I wanted to make this text box a password text box. I could come over here. I'll remove the text property because it's going to be a password box now, so it's not going to start with any text in there. And I'll highlight it, and I will look for this thing called the password char or character or whatever. Basically saying if I put anything in here, then whenever the user types in a character, it's going to appear as that character. So if I type an asterisks in there, just like that, when I run it and I go to type in this box, all I see are asterisks. Okay, and I can make that be anything I want. Where is that property? I can say question marks if I wanted to and run it. Now I've got question marks. We can make that whatever we want, but we can effectively make it a password box by having something in there. When I remove it, then we go back to normal text. Okay, very neat. A couple other things we like. Here I'll show you this is I can expand this horizontally, but you'll notice I can't expand it vertically. Okay, let me just there, nice and neat. I can't expand it vertically because it's a single line text box. When I'm typing, if I hit the enter key, I get nothing but a chime. I can't do more than one line. It is not a multi-line text box. All right. We can click on it and come down here into our properties and look for multi-line, turn that to true, and now it is a multi-line text box. And now when I run it, I can have multiple lines. So there's a lot of neat stuff, a lot of flexibility. The text box isn't simply a way to type in a name or whatever. We can do a lot of text into a text box. Text boxes can be huge and represent entire documents. Okay, so there's a lot of power with the text box. More so than just real simple inputs, but we can use it for real simple inputs as well. There's a lot of really neat stuff we can do there. There are other things like margins and paddings, max lengths, and stuff like that we can play around with. But for now, I mean, those are really the properties we really want to look at. All right. Let's modify this a bit here. I'm going to turn multiline back to false. All right. And we're going to look at how to use the text box a little bit here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a label and a button. Where's my button? Okay, so now we have a label and a button added to our form here. My label, I'll just leave it as label 1. I'll delete the text. My button, I'll leave as button 1, but I'll make say click me. Just like that. Okay, and my text box here, I will make it say enter your name. Wow, okay, name. Okay, and now we'll run this here just to make sure everything's there. And of course the click me doesn't work, it doesn't do anything yet. But what I want to do is I want to take whatever the user enters into this, enter your name, and put it in that label whenever they click the button. So I will double click on this button to get my button click event, and I will simply say label1.text equals, and I will say textbox1.text. The text property of the text box is the most powerful property. That's the one we use it for. Not only can we read from the text property, but we can write to the text property as well. It's a two-way street. It's a very powerful property of the text box. So when I run it, I'm going to say, hey, my name's Mike, and I will click, and I will see Mike. Fantastic. My name's Howard, and I click, and I see Howard. Okay. So very powerful. Okay. We can read to it. We can write to it. Okay. We can do a lot of neat things. All right. Some other stuff we can do here. Just this is sort of a, what I want to say. Just kind of a demo, if you will. I'm going to leave the click me button. I'm going to add another button. And this button is going to say unlock. Unlock. And I'll get to what I'm doing here in a second. We are going to take our text box here, and we are going to set enabled to false. All right. And when we double click unlock, we'll get our button to event handler, and we will say textbox1.enabled equals true. And I'll show you here what I'm getting at. I'm going to run this, and now we still have our text box, but it's purely for giving information to the user. It's just like a label at this point. I can't highlight it, I can't modify it or anything like that. All right, so I can use my text box purely for broadcasting information to the user, just like a label. However, at some point, maybe I want to be able to use this text box, just not now. So when the time is right, like when I click unlock, now it enables this box. I can put in Mike, and then I can click the click me and see Mike in the label. All right, so we can do neat stuff like that with our text boxes as well. All right, so that kind of, that's our text boxes. We can do neat stuff with it. I'm going to get rid of my button to event handler here, and I'm going to get rid of my button too because I'm sort of done with that. And I'm also going to get rid of my text box currently because I'm going to show you a different type of text box. There's a couple different text boxes we can use to do some neat things. And I'm going to empty out the event handler of our button one for now. I'll rerun it, just make sure everything builds. Perfect. Okay. So the next type I want to talk about, and let me find it here, is the masked text box. The masked text box works just like a normal text box. The user types into it, we can put whatever in there, but it has this thing called a mask. Okay, and a mask is an ability to format the text in a predetermined way. Okay, for instance, let's say I want the user to type in their phone number. I can give them a blank box, but if you think about it, what are all the different ways that they can type in their phone number? They could type in the area code and the number without any parentheses, spaces, or hyphens. They could type in the number without the area code at all. They could put the area code in parentheses, then a space, and then the first 3 of their phone number, then a hyphen, then the last 3 or 4 of their phone number. Assuming American anyway, I'm not sure about other countries and how their phone system works. I have no idea. But you can see there's a whole lot of different ways that they can format their phone number. So what I can do is I can force them to do it a certain way. So I'm going to click on the smart tag. That's what this is right here. And I'm going to go to set mask. And look at all these different masks. I can say, hey, it's going to be a 5-digit numeric. It's going to be a phone number. It's going to be a phone number without an area code, a short date, a social security number, a zip code, or we can do custom. I'm not going to provide a list of the characters to create a custom mask, but if you're curious, you could just do a search and find it. I'm sure it's fairly simplistic. So we can actually kind of get an indication of what those look like by clicking one of these. And so you see, by clicking here, we get our mask that's 999. The 9 here means this digit is optional. You have to provide either a 0 through 9 or a space, and it's optional. That's what these 9s mean. The 0 means you have to provide 0 through 9, and it's mandatory. All right, so kind of gives you an idea. You can build your own mask using these little characters and things like that. We're going to format this one like a phone number, so I'm going to hit OK right here, and now we see this is kind of our preview. And when I run it, well, actually, I'll do click me, and then I will say label1.text. It's going to equal masked text box.text. It still works the exact same way as a regular text box with its text property and everything. All the properties are primarily exactly the same. The only difference is a masked text box formats what's put into it. All right, so when I run it here, I get this here, and I will type in just some numbers. That's not my phone number. Don't try calling it. I have no idea whose phone number that might be. And so, yeah, we can just type in some random numbers here, and we can see that it gets formatted all nice and neat up there. All right. So if we try to go beyond that, it doesn't let us. We can't keep going. Furthermore, I can't put letters in here, and I can't overwrite or delete these parentheses, put things in that space, get rid of that hyphen. All right, so it's all formatted one particular way. I still can leave it empty, and that's what we see there. We'd need some data validation to prevent that from being incorrect. But you can see we can add this mask, and we can do some neat things with that. So there's a lot of different mask types. Okay. One more text box type I want to talk about. So let me go back to my event handler here and remove that. And we'll remove our masked text box. And now I want to add, where is it? A rich text box. Now, a rich text box is a neat control. Let me expand this here and shrink this down a little bit, just like that. Now, a rich text box works just like a regular text box, only we can put rich text in there. So that's text with like italics and bold and things like that. All right, so if I run it, and I can put text in it just like that, but I can also paste some formatted text in there. So I can go ahead and run this. Now I've copied to my clipboard some italic text. If I come in here and I hit paste, you can see the text is in italics now. All right, we can do bold and italics and things like that we can't normally do with a regular text box control. So the rich text box is pretty neat and allows us to add formatted text. So we can do sizes and bold and italics and whatever we want to do. All right, let me just get rid of that there. Okay, so so far some pretty neat things. We've looked at regular text boxes, some things we can do with it, mass text box for providing formatting and stuff like that, and rich text box, which allows us to have fancy text, if you will, where we can put stuff in there, take stuff from the users and stuff like that. And with the rich text box, we can do all sorts of stuff like auto selections and automatically finding URLs and things like that. We're not going to play around with all that stuff right now. Okay. So now I want to talk a little bit more about stuff we can do with our text boxes, but I'm going to come back to a regular text box to do it. So I'm going to come to the toolbox here. I'm going to find a regular text box, just like that, and we will put it in here. And we will say something like, yeah, we'll leave it as text box 1, but we'll say enter a number between 1 and 10. All right, obviously I need to make this box a little bit bigger to say all that. There we go, just like that. Okay, so in this program, let me add here, we're going to say again label1.text equals textbox1.text. This program is real simple. We expect the user to enter a number between 1 and 10, so 5 or 8. But since it's all strings, there's nothing to prevent us from just doing whatever we want. There's nothing to force the user to type in a number, right? And so we don't know exception handling yet. We don't really want to get into that just yet, but there's something else we can do. We can validate our text boxes, all right? It's a special event we can use with text boxes to sort of enforce the users to do what we want them to do, all right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add one more label here. Normally we'd use like a message box or something like that, but we haven't gotten to dialogues yet, so we're going to do it this way for now. And label 2 is going to be our LBL error, okay? That's going to be for our, if we have an error status. And its text is going to be blank, and hopefully we never see anything in there. Great. So now I want to talk about validating with this text box. So I have my text box highlighted. I'm going to click this little lightning bolt, and we see all these events the text box can respond to. But what I'm interested in is validating. That's important, validating. Okay, not validated. Whenever I type text into the text box, all right, and then take focus away from the text box. So if I'm typing in it and then I click away from it, okay, it's going to attempt to validate what's inside that text box. It's going to run the event validating, and then it's going, if I provide an event handler, it's going to use that event handler. All right, and I'm going to do that. And so at this point, I can say, hey, while it's validating, while it's in the process of validating, let's check something. So what we can say is int result. We'll just leave it like that. And then we can say if, int32.tryParse. Now what tryParse will do, will attempt to parse a string. If it succeeds, we can put the result into something, and if it fails, then it will just return false. That's why we have it inside a statement. So if tryParse textbox1.text out result, just like that. So it's going to put the result in this variable result, which we just created here, if it succeeds. All right. Okay, so basically we're saying if we're able to parse this and put it in result, we're going to do something in here. I'm going to say else, just real quick. Else, if we can't do that, we're going to say e.cancel equals true, and I'll talk about this here in a second. And we're going to say lbl error.text equals must enter a number. Okay. So there's that. So if this fails, the user did not enter a number. So we'll say eCancel equals true. E is the cancel event arguments. We'll talk about this more when we get to event handlers. But suffice to say, if I say e.cancel equals true, what we typed into that text box, it will not successfully validate. Okay. And then inside here, I'm going to say if result is greater, or what did I say? We want a number between 1 and 10. So I'll say greater than or equal to 1, and result is less than or equal to 10. Actually, let me change that. I'm going to say if result is less than 1 or result is greater than 10. We will say e.cancel equals true, and label error, label error dot text equals number must be between 1 and 10. All right, so what we're saying is basically this: try to parse this text box. If it fails to parse, they didn't enter a number. If it succeeds in parsing, then check to see if they put it between 1 and 10. If they didn't, we're going to cancel this again. So we're going to prevent the validation from happening. All right, and so we can actually run this and test it. So I'm going to, I don't want to resize it there. I'm going to say 5. And I click me, and I see that works just fine. However, let me try some text. And when I take the focus away, notice I see must enter a number. Okay? My click event isn't doing anything. It's not putting it up here in the label like I want it to because it's refusing to validate. All right? and I can type something else. Again, it's refusing to put it up there. Let me do 50. And again, it's refusing to put it up here because now it's saying number must be between 1 and 10. It's refusing to validate the text box based on our criteria there. All right. Oh, it won't even let me leave because it won't let me click out of this box until it successfully validates. So I can't do anything until I go okay, fine, you win, and then it lets me leave the program. So it won't let me even go away from the text box until it successfully validates. All right. So we have some validation code in there to make that work. And now let's look at one more event. So I'll make sure this is focused. And I'll come down here and I'll look for validated. Validated happens after validating. All right. So if it successfully validates, we can do something in here. Like I'm going to say lbl error.text equals successfully validated. Whoa, that's wrong. Validated. Good job. All right. And so I run it, and of course, if I just hit click me right now, whoops, because I never had focus in the box. Here, I screwed that up. Let me get out of here. Yeah, the box has to have focus, so you can see how I actually just managed to bypass it by never putting focus in the box, just clicking that button right off the bat. So if I say something like that, now I hit click me, must enter a number, some number, must be between 1 and 10. All right, 6, successfully validated. Good job. Okay, so validating works when you have focus in the box and you take it away. Like I said, when I first opened the program, the box didn't have focus, so I just hit click me, and I managed to bypass my validation altogether. So that's kind of where exception handling comes into play, because I can still manage to crash my program if I never give the box focus, and I manage to put faulty data in there and then try to parse it. So, okay. So there we go. So that's the validating of text boxes. Because it's very useful for a time until we get to exception handling, where exception handling becomes a very powerful ability to prevent crashes and errors like that with our text boxes. And then we start using those more than we use the validating here. But that is going to conclude my talk on text boxes. We covered properties, we covered password characters, we talked about multi-line text boxes, we talked about masked text boxes, rich text boxes, and validation. So it was a pretty big video. There's a lot to be said about text boxes. They're much more complex than just buttons that you click and labels that you write to. Text boxes are the major way we communicate with the user, and so there's a lot of functionality built into them. In most of the videos you're going to see in this course, we pretty much only use regular text boxes. I don't use masked text boxes or rich text boxes too often unless I need masks for something. I almost never use rich text boxes, but they exist and they're pretty neat. So feel free to check them out and play around with the different properties and stuff because they're very, very cool.